Hey, it's Carrie. Welcome to the Kingdom Life Women podcast, where impact isn't about fitting into the perfect Christian mold or having it all together. Here, we believe that you don't have to be flawless to make waves in the kingdom. So each week, we bring you honest conversations, a dose of humor, and hopefully some wisdom that meets you right where you are. So if you're ready to make a difference, let's go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's special episode of Kingdom Life Podcast. Of course, it's our Christmas episode, and I thought, what way to better celebrate Christmas than to get three other people that I absolutely don't know on one screen, and let's just talk about Christmas. So I just want to welcome both Rachel and Carrie and Sarah to the panel. We are going to have just an open discussion about Christmas. You know, we get taught all kinds of different things growing up about what Christmas is and what it isn't and what it should be. And so, you know, we're all in different places in our life, different stages in our life. We've had different experiences in our life. And so Christmas can look really different for everyone. Some people have families that they're celebrating with, and some people are alone. Some people have kids, and some people are still waiting to have kids. And then some people have 15-year-olds that they're counting down the days that they go to college. And then, you know, some people have husbands and some people are single and some people are going to their families for Christmas, but they really don't like their family. And some people are having their Christmas at their house with their family. They do like their family. And it's a lot of fruits and nuts. That's the truth. It's a box of chocolates. As was that
Forrest
like
Gump.
Forrest Gump. So lots of different opportunities to talk about Christmas. So I'm going to introduce our panel to you in kind of a special way. So I'm going to start off just by asking questions, and they're going to answer the question, and then they're going to let you know a little bit about who they are. And as you hear each of our beautiful women introduce themselves, I guarantee that they will have something that you need, because the Lord always brings what you need, right? So Rachel, why don't we start with you since you're in the lineup? So what is for you the best Christmas movie you've ever seen?
Ooh, okay. The best Christmas movie I've ever seen. Maybe it's because I've seen it so many times, or maybe it's because I know it so well that I can pretty much quote the entire thing. But Elf is just a
Oh, yeah.
classic. It's my mom's favorite movie of all time. And so we watched it a ton when I was growing up. My daughter asked this year, she was like, I want to watch Elf like last week. I'm like, yes, I'm raising this kid right. And it's such a good one. It's such a good one. I think it's probably Will Ferrell's best work, if I had to say so. But yeah, that one is absolute classic.
Yes, we watch that one every Christmas, but not this Christmas yet. So, I got to know what everybody's Christmas favorite movie is. So, Carrie, what's your favorite Christmas movie?
Well, since Rachel said Elf, I won't say that. I guess I'll go with Home Alone. That's definitely another classic.
That's a classic. I will tell you a really funny story about Home Alone. So I have two children. My second child is my 15-year-old. And I will tell you that child, when he was a kid, was the spitting image of Macaulay Culkin. And what's really funny is when I literally gave birth to him, the first thing the doctor said was, wow, look at the ears on that kid. What's like very literally. He's never seen the movie, though. I tried to get him to watch it, and he thought I was making fun of him, so he got mad. Now he won't watch it. So there you go. Sarah, what about you? What's your favorite Christmas movie?
You know, I don't know that I have a favorite. I didn't really grow up watching Christmas movies, but I have all brothers. I'm the only sister. I'm the princess amongst many princes. And so probably Die Hard, even though many would say that that's not a Christmas movie.
For sure, Christmas movie.
That's a Christmas movie.
But for me, you know, what kind of sparks that nostalgia would be the claymation Frosty the Snowman, or the Rudolph, you know, with the claymation Santa and all of that. Even though growing up, we did not celebrate with Santa. For some reason, whenever I see that pop onto the screen, I'm like, yes, it's Christmas time. So I think that's where that nostalgia comes from.
Yeah, it's like the harbinger of Christmas. I remember watching those when I was a kid, and my son is like, "What is that garbage?" But like, this is old people Christmas. Don't worry about it. This is old
It's
people
old
Christmas.
people Christmas. That's right.
Yes. So I just watched a brand new Christmas movie a couple of nights ago called Red One. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah, I want to see
No.
that. My husband and I were going to go.
You must see it. It is the best Christmas movie I've ever seen. But here's the
Wow.
crazy thing. You know, the Lord has me in this space where he is just unveiling so much about the different facets of who he is. So I sit in this movie, and at one point, I'm even cried in the movie. And my husband's like,
Me.
he knows not to say anything. But the truth is, like, the parallels with Jesus in that movie are dumbfounding. Like, it's so crazy. If you look at it from that aspect, it'll become your favorite Christmas movie. It's really, really good. So y'all gotta check that out.
We
So
will. That's a good
Rachel,
suggestion. Thank you.
you will love it. And it's got The Rock in it. So I mean,
Oh, wow.
And,
There you
and
go.
he's not wearing tights. If he was wearing tights, that'd probably ruin it for me, but he's not. So we're good. We're good. So Rachel, when we were talking earlier, you do some pretty cool stuff that actually speaks to me and my audience will understand. So you actually specialize in people. You do a couple of things, but you actually specialize in people that have ADHD. Talk about that a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 7. And I was very fortunate that I grew up with a mom who had ADHD herself. And so when she saw the signs in me, she knew that, we had to do something about it. She was aware of it. And so I grew up with a lot of support in that area and very high achieving as a child. School was really easy for me and I excelled. And then I got into the real world, which is nothing like school. And I actually started my YouTube channel that really specifically talks about ADHD after I had graduated. My now ex-husband and I had spontaneously decided to sell all of our worldly possessions and move to Guatemala, as
Okay.
ADHDers tend to do. And what was supposed to be just a little YouTube channel to keep our friends and family updated, because they all thought we were going to perish as the large volcano had just exploded down there. It ended up just snowballing, and I started creating ADHD content, and it started ministering to people, and it's just become this beautiful space for my heart. I got married to my wonderful husband last year. He has ADHD as well. He also has brain cancer. He's fine. Everything's fine, but there's a lot of
fine. He's fine. I still
He's
make him clean the
fine.
house. He's fine.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. He's got 2 kinds of cancer, but we're all good. So there's a lot of chaos that happens in our house, and our kids are pretty much guaranteed to have ADHD as
Right.
well. And so, yeah, it surrounds my life, and it's just something that I'm really, really passionate about.
I love that. I think that's awesome. I was telling you guys a story before about a lady that said something very ugly to someone that was talking about having ADHD. And I just stepped right in. I didn't even know the lady or the lady she was talking to. And I said, no, ma'am, that's a superpower. And so it is a really cool thing, but it can be hard to bridle in all aspects, But would you say that most high achievers, I mean, that is kind of part of their personality?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, look at Peter in the Bible. He's the one that Jesus chose to build the church on, and he for sure has ADHD. He's jumping out of the boat. He's cutting off the ears. Yeah, we've got some good company as far as the ADHD so.
And like, I've never thought about that, but you're right. Totally fits the profile, right?
For sure.
I love it. All right, Sarah, I'm going to jump over to Miss Amazing Grace here. Sarah Amazing Grace. So I love this question. What is the weirdest or the most chaotic thing that has ever happened to you on Christmas?
The weirdest and most chaotic. My gosh, my life is super chaotic. And so it's hard to pin down one thing.
She's
But-
like, well, no.
I'm going to have to think about that. The most weird and chaotic, probably falling and almost breaking my leg and having to the ER surrounding Christmas time.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's a lot there. I mean, my life seems to be chaotic in a lot of ways. So,
So it's not just a Christmas thing.
It's
all the
not just
time
a
thing.
Christmas thing. Yeah. It's not just a Christmas thing. But yeah.
Now,
Yes.
Sarah, you have a really cool podcast. When I was taking a look at you earlier, I said, I scrolled through your podcast and it was so, it made me want to go watch them because I'm like, what does this mean? What does this mean? So talk a little bit about your podcast.
My podcast is The Remedy with Sarah Amazing Grace, and you can find it pretty much on all of the major channels also on YouTube and on Rumble. My podcast was born out of the pandemic, and I just had kind of a spiritual awakening, as the case may be.
Mhm.
And Ephesians 5:14 says, "Awake, O sleeper, and Christ will give you the light." And that's kind of what happened to me. I just had a vision and I could see that there was a spiritual battle going on that was manifesting itself in the physical, and that the remedy was Jesus, the real Jesus, the one that comes in and saves that which is lost. And um, I was seeing that there was a real lack of truth being spoken and said. And so I've been a truth seeker my entire life. And that is what led me to Jesus to begin with, that Jesus is truth. And so that is where my my podcast, I originally set out for it to be the focus of Jesus, but Jesus is truth. And so my podcast kind of slid into a niche of being a truther podcast, and
Mhm.
that's what it is.
I love that. I love that. So Carrie and I want to know, how many episodes have you done?
I don't even know. Well over 100. I'm well
Wow,
over
that's a
100.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Congratulations. That's
I'm in
so
my fourth season, or the fourth season has been released. The fifth season is in recording. And also I do both now. So over the years, podcasting has changed. It used to be something that was just recorded and then edited and then put out. But now podcasting has changed to be more uh, live. And so I
video
do
and
a lot of live streams now. And so I don't even know what number I'm at yet as far as shows, because the live streams. And I have the blessing of being invited, like today, to be on panels and being a guest on other podcasts. And I just love the community of group think. I think that it's so incredible, and God has really gifted each and every one of us very uniquely and has called us each uniquely. And like Rachel was sharing about her personal experience with ADHD, and her husband and his experience, and maybe their kids, and then that has become a ministry for her. I really believe that your hardest trial, the test, really becomes your testimony, and not in
Mhm.
a cliche Christian way, but in a way, what was meant for evil, the Lord will use for good, for the saving of many
Mhm.
lives. And the Bible
Yeah.
really gives us that promise that someday we will be known as we will know as we are fully known. And that just means that someday we're going to actually know. We'll have all of that knowledge that we don't have now, to see the beginning and end and how everything fits together. And it'll be right. And I know
Yeah.
that.
I think that's incredible. It's so true. I mean, I have had such a metamorphosis over the last 3 years with the Lord. Almost everything I thought I knew was not truth. A lot of it was truth, but I somehow, through religion, missed relationship. I had a
Hmm.
relationship with God, but I mean, when you go to that next level of relationship, it changes everything. I
Hmm.
mean, it literally changes everything.
Yeah.
So Carrie is wearing her best Christmas sweater today. If I had that on, I would be like, you'd see me sweating. So
Yes.
Carrie, you're
Same
in Mississippi,
girl.
right?
Same.
You're in Mississippi right now.
I am. It
What's
is
the weather like?
warm. Yeah, we
Yeah.
turn the air on. Same.
Amen, sister. Oh, I would have made a horrible pioneer woman. I do not like sweat, and I do not like non-air conditioning. So, and then there's the Indians and stuff, so that wouldn't work for me. So, Cherry, here's my question for you. Um, I love this question. As soon as I read it, I went, "Oh, this is a great question." So, if Jesus spent Christmas with you, like physically by your side, what do you think he'd want to spend the day doing with you?
We would write. I love to write, and I've just finished my first book, a young adult Christian fiction novel. And I too have a little ADHD, so I'm right there with you, sisters. I'm right there with you. And I used to think the Bible verse "Be still and know" was for everybody else. It was not for me. And
What
when
I
I
can't be
run,
I'm trying
yeah,
to be still.
yes, and writing is definitely a midlife calling for me. And so when I finally did surrender and said, okay, if you want me to write, we're going to write. But I had to sit down, I had to be still. Sometimes it was standing at my island in my kitchen or at my outside bar, but I had to be still. I had to get to the computer. I had to write. And and the words, I could just feel the Holy Spirit just giving me the words, and I was just flowing on the computer screen, I mean on the keyboard, and it was real sweet. I finally realized what "be still and know" means, and so I have a great time with Jesus. Early in the morning, I have to get up before the rest of the house, and I have 3 boys, and they're all older now, except my youngest is 15, so I
Mhm.
can relate to having
Relate.
a 15-year-old in the house. But so one last one that's not driving himself, but I do get up early, and that was just a habit that I started when they were little, and because I needed that time with God before everybody else needed me. I mean, I'm sure you can relate to that. And so I just learned to crave it. And my boys and my husband know that if I don't get that quiet time in the morning, I'm not the same mama, not the same wife.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
so Jesus, I definitely have to give him first place, first fruits in the morning. Yes.
Yes, like I tell my husband, I promise you this will make me a better person. It will
Yeah.
make me
Yeah.
nicer.
Mhm.
You will like me
Mhm.
more.
Yes.
Just let me get my hour. Let me do my thing. So, did any of you guys have any crazy traditions on Christmas like that maybe they had a deeper meaning. They seem kind of insignificant or silly, but they held a deeper meaning for you.
I do. So my dad was a Calvary Chapel pastor,
Hmm.
and on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day households, those days are generally relegated for the church. There's Christmas Eve services and Christmas Day activities and things like that that are going on that the pastor often has to be around or the pastor's family is. And so we really didn't celebrate Christmas Day or Christmas Eve in any traditional way. So we, as a family, when us kids were young, we would celebrate on the 23rd, which is the day before Christmas Eve. And way back in the early 80s, back in the Stone Age, my older brother, he coined the day. He said, well, since Adam came before Eve, why don't we call this Christmas Adam? And that was the day that my family would celebrate.
What?
And so,
What?
yeah, so every year, even still to this day, that is what I celebrate as our Christmas tradition is we celebrate on the 23rd on Christmas
That's so
Adam.
cool. I cannot wait to tell my husband and my kids that. My husband is born on December the 24th. So growing up,
Mhm.
or had Christmas parties or anything like that, the family would be like, oh, go get a gift from under the tree, right? So when we got together, I started throwing in birthday parties the week before. And so we're always talking about, at one point we talked about having his birthday on the 23rd instead of the 24th. So I had to tell him about Christmas Adam. I think that's funny. I think it's
Yeah.
awesome.
And my dad would go to pastors' conferences and he would talk about this, and it spread throughout the
Bad.
pastor community. And it's actually
Yeah.
even in the Urban Dictionary now. If you Google Christmas Adam, it'll come up as
How
celebrating the day before
cool.
Christmas Eve. It's crazy. But that started in our living room back in like 1982, us little kids talking about Adam coming before Eve. And anyway, that's my
That's
crazy family
super
tradition.
cool. That's very cool. Rachel, what about you? Did you have any kind of traditions?
Yes. So my family, so we grew up, I'm still in Metro Detroit, and my parents' families of origin both lived in Ohio. We are Ohio State fans. That's a whole thing. If you're up here, I've been bullied my entire life because of it. But anyways, so we would end up traveling about 3 hours down to my mom's parents' house a couple days before Christmas. And then normally it's either the night of the 25th or the morning of the 26th. We would travel about an hour, 2 hours over to my dad's parents' house. So we were very much traveling, and we never one single time growing up did I have a Christmas morning in my own home. I didn't get to wake up, run downstairs to the tree, none of that.
Wow.
And where that kind of comes in, I'm realizing as we're sitting here, this has become full circle. So I married a man who had 2 children. I brought a child into the marriage, and we were all in the same house last Christmas for our very first Christmas together. And I'm realizing that this year we're going to wake up with no children in our house. And it has been, I've honestly been wrestling with God a little bit over it, because
Right.
Christmas just so, it's not looking how I pictured being a mom at Christmas time would look. But now as we're sitting here, I'm seeing that God has been preparing me for this. You could look at it as a disjointed Christmas. Oh, I grew up, I never had Christmas in my own home. But now I'm seeing God's been preparing my heart for my entire life to be able to be the best possible mama to these children who are going to come into my home from other places to celebrate their Christmas. And it makes it no less special for us to celebrate as a family, celebrating on a day other than the 25th. And so that was a real special realization I had just now as we're having this conversation.
Yeah, it can look different. I remember the first Christmas that my mom and dad had both passed away. And it's weird because I was an adult, but when both of your parents die, you feel like an orphan. It's very bizarre because you don't expect that. Nobody tells you. And I remember thinking, well, what do we do for Christmas now? And there was a little bit of a recalibration that had to happen.
Mhm.
I'm sure we'll be like that as much as I pick on my 15-year-old. I'm sure we'll be like that too. So, Carrie, are both of your parents still alive?
My dad passed away 3 years ago. My mom has had Alzheimer's for 14 years. She's in memory care at a local assisted living. But my mom was always an elf. She loved Christmas. She shopped. She always had a ton of presents, like mountains of presents around the tree. And so I have tried to carry on those traditions, is
Mm,
not to be overworldly, but to be sure that on a more simplified scale, make sure my children do get something that they desire, something that they need. But my kids have always said, Mom, you're going to be the fun granny like Granny was before she got
so
Alzheimer's.
thoughtful.
And so I do try to make Christmas special. Now, my dad grew up, he was raised by an uncle that was Air Force, and his favorite assignment was Germany. And so my husband was Air
Mm,
Force, and we lived in Germany. And so all things Christmas, Christmas tree, St. Nicholas,
yeah.
all the decorations started in Germany. So, in honor of my dad, since he has passed away, we've tried to include some of the German traditions. It's been really fun.
Yeah. So when you kind of had to take up the torch, right? I know that sometimes, for a lot of people, the holidays, especially if you've lost parents or you've lost children or you've been through a divorce or you're single, a lot of people battle with these kind of, I'm going to call them unmet expectations, but really what they look like is you see all that happiness going on TV and all the songs are about it. And you're like, man, what about me? Did you have to deal with sort of some unmet expectations when you kind of stepped into that role?
For me, I did start hosting. My mom and dad always hosted on Christmas Day. It was mayhem because we all live on family land. So my brother-in-law hosted breakfast burritos, my parents hosted lunch, and my in-laws hosted dinner. So and nobody wanted to break away from tradition. So we've kind of kept that chaotic schedule every Christmas.
Yeah.
So it's the calm before the storm this week, and then next week will be the cook, cook, cook,
The
go,
flood.
go, go.
Yeah.
And but we do try to have a calm Christmas Eve. We try to go to Christmas Eve service and just go out to dinner as a family. Just my husband and my 3 boys. So we do
Oh,
try to
that's really
protect.
cool.
Yeah.
That's a good tradition. That's a really good tradition. I feel like, kind of like you said, Rachel, I feel like we always travel for Christmas now that the
Yeah.
kids are older. my oldest son lives in Maryland, and so we're headed there. We went to New York, and spent New York and Christmas and New Year's with them last year. And so it's funny how when they grow up and they get married or they move away, it just really Christmas like starts to really change. And it brings up a great point. Like, how will I feel when it's just me and my husband?
Mhm.
What will that feel like? I mean, I've been raising kids since I was 20 years old. I don't even know what it feels like to be in an empty house. So I can imagine there's some emotion that's tied to that for you. What is it? I mean, I know there has to have been some sadness, right? Where you kind of come to that realization. How do you try to push that away, or do you sort of ask God how to fix it? Do you invite him into that? Like, what does that look like for you? Like realistically.
Sure. And daylight savings ruined this for me. I'm still clawing my way back. For several months, I think from August until the time change, I was waking up around 4 o'clock in the morning every day to just sit and listen to God's voice because, I mean, Jesus really is the reason I'm alive. I walked through a very, very difficult time during my divorce to the point that I became suicidal. The only thing that kept me alive was my little boy and God building the support system around me. And
Wow.
so, truly, connecting to the Father is my lifeline. And so, I spent months and months waking up at about 4 o'clock in the morning in order to spend time with God and really just drawing on who He says I am. And the experience that He has for me has been instrumental because I lived life where I had a plan. I carried out my plan. I had all my ducks in a row. I knew exactly how my life was going to go. And then one day I woke up and my entire life had exploded.
Yeah.
Everything that I had so carefully laid out for myself, the plan I was so proud to have constructed, blew up in space. And I found myself a single mom of a 4-month-old baby, nowhere to go, no idea what I was going to do. And God very, very clearly presented me with, okay, all right, this is what happens when you're the one making the plan. How about I take a turn now?
Mhm.
He has
Wow.
more than proven himself to me. And so things like this, things like reckoning with the fact that motherhood looks vastly different than I thought, feels so silly in comparison to what he's already led me through. And so things like this, it's almost like when you get a little scrape as a child, right? Really, the worst part is that initial shock and that initial pain. And then once you kind of calmed down, you realize, oh, this really isn't that bad. And
Good.
this is kind of one of those things. I'm in several different mom groups at my church and at other churches in the area, and I had been kind of, I don't know that left out is the right word, but feeling a little bit other. Just listening to all these moms sharing their experience of their children in the home with them full time and, being worn out by the demands of motherhood, which is so incredibly real. And kind of sitting to myself and feeling like, oh, I feel like a part-time parent. I don't feel like I fit here. And so turning
Mm.
back to my father, that time within the stillness and the quietness of the morning, turning to my father and seeing what his vision is for my motherhood. And his plan is truly just always better than ours. And so that's really been how I've dealt with all of this.
I love that. It's so true. And let's face it, sometimes we're really headstrong, right? We want what we want. We love comfort. There's nothing wrong with that. We love comfort, but very seldom does God allow us to stay in the comfort. Sometimes I tell him, we could just stay here for a little bit. I mean, we don't have to do all the things right now. We can take some time, but it's true. You look at things one way, and then when it changes, you really have a decision to make, right? Will you trust God in it? Will you continue to trust God in it, right? Even when it doesn't feel good, even when it doesn't feel like you can trust him. Those are always the hardest moments. Or are you just going to succumb? Do you give in to that depression? And unfortunately, some people do. And, it was one of the very first things that God healed in me as he remade me was suicidal depression. And, a lot of people deal with it. I had no idea how many people dealt with it, but for me, I looked totally functional. You would never know. I was a great actress. My own husband didn't know. We lived together, you know, and I mean, when the Lord healed me of it, it was so right then. I mean, it was just like that sitting on that couch behind me. But then what happened was that wasn't the end, right? Then anytime you kick something out, it always like
tries to come back in, is this door open? Can I get in? So even now I may wake up and there may be things going on in my life that don't feel good. And I wake up and, if you've ever had depression, the difference between being sad and depressed. It feels different in your heart, right? And other people may not recognize it, but if you've ever walked through it, you know what it feels like. And so when I wake up and I feel that little like, I'm like, oh no, we're not doing this. So I have to make a conscious decision not to come into agreement with it. And I'm sure that you also have the same experience. I know I do a lot of work with single moms, and it's really hard for them at Christmas. It's really hard for them. It's hard when they have no one, but it's also hard when the dad of the child is in the picture and he does the Disneyland dad thing, right? Where he buys all the stuff that you can't afford to buy. And then you have to listen all Christmas about how great dad is, and you're like, I put shoes on you and pay for your school lunch. Like what, So it's interesting how life throws you these curveballs, right? What Jesus already comes in, always comes in. Sarah, I was thinking about what you said about never really getting to celebrate Christmas, like it always being something different, and I think everybody, listen, you know how it is. Every single Christian woman wants to marry a pastor. That's what they want. Worldly women want to marry doctors and Christian women want to marry pastors, but they're kind of one and the same. You have to be on for everybody all the time, and sometimes I'm sure that means that your own family, gets pushed to the side. So how did you cope with, or did you ever have to cope with that feeling where it's like, God, can we just have a normal Christmas?
Yeah, definitely. There's a reason that PKs, pastors' kids, go off the rails, right?
Right,
There's a reason. Being in the family of a pastor is very, very difficult. It's not a glamorous life. In fact, it's a very lonely life for the wife of the pastor. And, pastors' kids often are under intense, incredible scrutiny by church. We talked briefly about churchianity and Christianese and this fake blanket of judgment, and it's that is not Jesus, by the way. That is
Thank you for
man-made
saying that.
garbage. Yeah, that is man-made garbage,
Mhm.
and it belongs in the trash, and it hurts a lot of pastors' kids, pastors' families. Um, uh, and so, yes, just specifically for, around Christmas, or, just holidays in general, or birthdays, when a pastor is called, and if they have a congregation of any size, they're going to be called away. And I imagine it would be the same for a doctor or somebody who's on call. That yes, when they get a call, it doesn't matter if it's your birthday, or it doesn't matter if it's your school program, or, whatever. That is going to take precedence, and especially in the life of a pastor, because their number one is the Lord and in service of the Lord. And so, how can you put something else above the Lord? You can't. So it is I actually wouldn't wish that life on anybody. I
Yeah.
don't, I didn't want to ever marry a pastor. I didn't want to be part of a pastoral family. The Lord called me and chose me to be in ministry. I'm not a pastor. I don't want to be a pastor. I have no desire for that. But in ministry, I didn't even want to be in ministry. I wanted to run as far away from that as I could. And, man makes their plans and the Lord guides the steps. And I think that he, my added is that he, maybe chuckles along the way. Like, yeah,
Absolutely.
that was cute.
Yeah.
This is what I've actually called you to do. Right. And so, we see that in the book of Jonah. We see Jonah like, man, I
Yeah.
do not want to do that. And the Lord's like, all right, cool. And he bounces into the ocean, and, that he ends up ultimately going and fulfilling the purpose that his life was called to do. But
How everybody, like, they'll ask, when you go to like a woman's conference, people will be talking about, so what biblical woman do you, what biblical character do you resonate with? And everybody around me is saying stuff like, oh, Hannah and Deborah. And I'm like, Jonah, Jonah. Whatever he tells me to do, I'm saying no and doing my own thing. And then next thing I know, I'm in the belly of a fish. When I get thrown more. It's awful.
What people don't realize, though, when they're reading, scripture or at these women's conferences, and I've spoken at a lot of women's conferences, and I'm not a Debbie Downer, but I'm a real person. I've been through the ringer. We don't have children at Christmas. Our children are in heaven. We lost 18 children, and so I never got to be a mother on this earth.
Yeah.
Someday when we get to heaven, I will, but my life looks a lot different than I thought that it would, celebrating
Right.
Christmas. And, our lives often do. They look different than we what we put forth. And, it's when I go to, these women's conferences, and it's, you know, you got this. Yeah, you're the Deborah, or you're the Ruth, or you're looking for your Boaz, or, all this
Yeah.
kind of Christianese. And I get what they're doing. They're trying to encourage people, because this life is really hard and people need encouragement. But I would be serving alongside people who would say, I can't really relate to you, Sarah. I've never lost anybody. I don't even know anyone who's died. And
Mm.
I'm like, we've lost all of our children. What happens? Where's the Bible story about you
About that.
prayed and the
Wow.
worst of the worst happens? Where's that
Yeah.
Bible story? Because that's the person that I relate to. I relate to the
Right.
person who prayed, who had faith that could have moved mountains, who had thousands of people praying and still held the body of their dead child. I'm that
Yeah.
person. So what story is that? But if you look actually at the biblical heroes, their lives were incredibly hard.
Yes.
Joseph, we have Joseph, he's beaten, he's sold into trafficked into slavery to another town, taken away from his family. And we have him being thrown into prison. He's trying to do the right thing. He gets lied about, thrown into prison, threatened, kind of like the Man in Black, Princess Bride moment, good night,
Yeah.
Wesley, I'll most likely kill you in the morning. I don't know if you ever watched that movie, but it was that kind of scenario,
yeah.
every night for Joseph.
Yeah.
And there were people in there, and he thought, oh, these people are my hope. I'm going to get out. And then those people get out, and they totally forget about Joseph. He's still there for years more. It's horrible. But then he gets out and he gets put in this position. I mean, just think of all of the things that Joseph went through. And
Yeah.
him, thinking like, Lord, did you forget about me? What about my prayers? Do you hate me, Lord? Like, am I cursed? Was I born under the wrong star? No. Then he's the second in command, and he ends up saving all of these people because of, God gives him the ability to interpret dreams. And, this incredible thing happens to him in his life, and his brothers come, his brothers who
Yeah.
sold him and trafficked him, and his brothers show up. And Joseph says to them, what you meant for evil, God meant for good, for the saving of many lives.
Yeah.
For this I was chosen. And it's like, if you start looking at the biblical heroes and their lives, you realize that their lives are incredibly hard. Hannah, barren,
Yeah.
basically giving her life, well, there's nothing else I can do. I might as well give my life to the church, and
Yeah.
there's just
Rest enjoy.
like, if you start unpacking it for real, you realize that it isn't this lie that these people have great lives and you somehow don't. That's not it. The ones the Lord chooses have the hardest road to hoe, but they have the most intense, amazing, mind-blowing, miraculous callings to go through.
I have friends and listeners on this podcast that, they have lost children.
Hmm.
And it's tough. My sister lost a child. It is really tough. There is nothing like it. What advice would you give to those moms as they're going into the holiday season, where I guess a lot of times they feel pressured to perform happiness? You know what I mean? Like, you feel like you got to be happy. It's Christmas, but really, like, your heart is dying. What advice would you give them in that situation?
I don't have advice, because it's such an incredibly intense, unless you've walked the road, you cannot possibly understand how deep of a
Yeah.
wound the loss of a child is. I can only share what the Lord shared with me. You guys had talked about depression and suicidal depression. I was in a suicidal depression after the death of our last child and the ability to never have children again. And I was in such a deep depression, but I didn't want to die because I didn't want to even see the God that would have allowed this to happen. I was so
Mm.
angry at God that I didn't want to commit suicide because I didn't want to go and even see him or face him. I mean,
Wow.
I mean, that's just a beyond desperation. You can't live and you can't die. And
Yes.
that's where I know that a lot of people who have lost tremendous, profound losses in this life sit. And what the Lord showed me was actually at a women's conference as I was standing around looking at all of this stuff that didn't make any sense to me because of the road that I've walked in my life. Um, and it was the Lord who spoke to me and said, Sarah, you're not cursed. I
Mm.
chose you for this. Someday you will know why and it will be right. But do you trust me?
Yeah.
And the answer from God in Job chapter 38, some people think it's harsh. I love Job chapter 38. It's God's answer to Job's why. Why would you let this happen? My children died. I'm sick. I've lost everything. I'm sitting in the ashes of my life and my everything is in rubble. My friends, everything is done. God, why would you allow this to happen? And God's response is basically, and I'm paraphrasing, is you can't understand the question, let alone the answer. You don't know
Yes.
how mountains were formed or how eagles' wings are set to flight, and you can't understand how I keep the oceans within the borders. So how am I going to explain to you why? Do you trust me? Is basically the sum up of it. You
Yeah.
can't possibly fathom why, but do you trust me? And it's a place that each one of us believers have to come to. It's a desperate place. And it's,
Yeah.
Lord, I
Yeah.
don't know why. It's horrible. It's nothing that I ever would have wanted or what it looks like or what I've been taught in church. If you just believe, if you just have faith, if you
Oh,
just do everything right, none of this bad stuff will happen. But that's not reality. And it wasn't reality for these biblical heroes either. Their lives, the worst happened to them also. But your life isn't over, and God will use that if you let him, and your life will become something that is incredible. And to know that this life isn't all there is. We have eternity with
right.
those children that's coming, and they are in that great cloud of witnesses. Oh, it's there. But God can redeem that. God is in the redemption business, and he can take your life, you sitting in those ashes. Only he can take those ashes and make something beautiful out of it. And so that is my advice.
Amen.
My
I think
advice
that's
is to
so
Amen.
trust in
great.
God.
Amen.
Yes. And trust never happens. People always think about trusting in God, but until you have that Job moment, and it looks different for everyone, you can say whatever you want to say, but in that moment, do you trust? And knowledge is the absolute enemy of trust. The more you know, the less you have to trust. It's when you just don't know why, when, where, how. I mean, that's the moment where trust happens. And I think we go through cycles of that throughout our life, regardless of what we're walking through. I mean, all of you ladies have incredible stories. And so we've all walked through things. And, it's like I used to tell my husband all the time, you can't just sit down and die. It just doesn't work like that, right? Fortunately, I'm glad that God set it up like that. And, if we can, I think sometimes if we can literally come to the end of ourselves, God can get started. Like he can pick it up and he can take the baton and he's like, I don't need you to do anything. except sit." I know that was the situation for me. I just said, I just can't anymore. I don't even know who I am. I can't find myself. And that's it. I'm at the end of my rope. And he's so faithful. And that is Jesus. That is exactly what he brought into the world. Over the last few years, I mean, I know a lot about the Bible, but how sometimes you read something but you don't really understand it. You just think you do, or you've been taught about it all of your life and you think, oh, this is what that means. As the Lord began to literally, I used to call it the unbuilding stage, where he just unbuilt me. He just disproved everything I knew, everything I knew. I grew up in a Pentecostal church, so I knew a whole lot about sin and hell. And fortunately, I knew a lot about the Holy Spirit too, which was great. Right. But I didn't know a whole lot about the love of God. I heard them talk about it, but I didn't know about it. And I didn't know, Rachel, that was his superpower. Right. Ours is ADHD. His is love. And it like trumps, it's the trump card. It's the holy trump card. It trumps everything. And if you think back, like if you really just allow your mind to kind of go back there, this little bitty baby caused it all. If you go back to that moment, and I don't know about you guys, but when I read the Bible, sometimes I'm very theatrical. So my husband says dramatic, I think is the term he uses. But I was thinking about like what did it actually look like? Because men were writing the Bible, and they leave out a lot of details. And so I guarantee you that when Mary went to Joseph and said, "Hey, hey, look, we need to talk," there was a lot more that went down in that moment, right? And all the townspeople were talking. There was a whole lot of, women were ugly back then, just like they are now. There was a whole lot of talking. And I think to myself, Mary, I mean, people talk about Mary's yes, but I think we forget like actually what that probably looked like, being completely shunned, everybody thinking she was a liar. Thankfully, Joseph wrote it out too, So if you think about that, Rachel, what do you think, that actually looks like for real, like in real time? When we're thinking about the birth of Jesus, what do you think people missed?
Oh my goodness. I mean, now knowing what I know, and I went to Christian school. I grew up in a Christian family, so I've done the whole Bible thing my entire life. But only after my life really fell apart did I actually learn what it means to follow Jesus. And even just the standard Bible stories, there's so many layers that we've missed just based on our limited Western understanding, not understanding the Eastern cultures and all of the different intricacies of the culture and the language and all of that go into it. My pastor brought up a point this past Sunday that I had never even thought of, and that's that Joseph's reputation was tarnished by this too.
Yes.
His plan just to quietly divorce Mary, send her away, which he really could have had her executed. Like he fully was within his rights to have her executed for this.
Yeah.
And not only did he choose not to do that, which probably could have saved his reputation, even if he hadn't gone through with this divorce process, he would have been tarnished. No other father would have wanted to trust their daughter to this man whose fiance miraculously was with child. And so just the sheer weight of these cultural expectations and then the reality of what God was asking them to walk through, it's completely mind-blowing. And something that always comes to mind for me is, scripture talks about avoid the very appearance of evil. And this idea of Mary being with child in this situation where there's no human explanation for it kind of turns that on its head for me. And it's something I haven't quite figured it out, but I love kind of poking and prodding at things and seeing what I can figure out. And it's one of those things that's still just kind of spinning around in my brain. There's so many facets to it. And I love that about God and his storytelling abilities. There's always something new, no matter how many times you've heard these stories. I grew up probably able to tell like the entire story of David and his lineage before I could spell my own name. And yet there's still so much to uncover. And it's no different with the story of Christ and his birth. There's something in it for everyone. There's so many layers to it. And it's so incredibly heavy when you kind of strip away the, oh, happy baby in a manger.
Yeah.
Fluff around it. I think we so do a disservice to ourselves. And I honestly think the enemy's done a fantastic job of softening the blow of this story by making it this fluffy, happy little thing. And there's cute little sheep and they're all the manger. When you strip all that away, wow. It's truly a life and death story on so many different levels.
I love that. I have often wondered in my mind to myself, like, what was I mean, was Joseph like, look, Mary, I mean, I love you and all, but this seems like a lot, But it's true, he put his whole life on the line too, his whole reputation. We always talk about Mary's yes, but Joseph gave his yes too, and I have to tell you, I have a lot of respect for men that do those types of things. I think there's, unfortunately, especially in our culture now, it's almost like we've trained men to walk away. Imagine that situation. Like, how would that be handled today? So I love that you said that. And it's crazy. Everything Jesus did from the moment he was conceived, from the conception, everything, I always call it, it's like Alice in Wonderland. Up is down and down is up. It turns everything on its head. Everything on its head. I'm telling you, I'm writing a book this year. It's going to be called Falling Through the Looking Glass. It's like everything that Jesus did was to prove that everything that had been said was not right, And then he comes in and it's almost like this love bomb. That's what he drops, this love bomb. And he's like, I love you anyway. It does. For me, it's such the antithesis to what I was taught, that when I realized that this moment in time, this little baby, this one person changed everything. And I know it's been the whole plan all along, right? But there were so many moving parts to that plan, and there was so much humanity wrapped up in that plan, just in the birth of that baby. And forget what happens afterward, right? All of that leading up to the crucifixion, then the crucifixion, and how it set even the atmosphere, even the heavens on its head, And I just think to myself, how can you not be just utterly fascinated with Jesus? Like, just utterly fascinated with Jesus. So, Carrie, when I was thinking about questions as we were, getting ready to start videoing, I read this question. I thought it was really a fascinating question. It was something that I never really considered. So I'm going to pose it to you. You can thank me later. So if you think about Jesus's birth, I love it. Rachel's right. We can dress it up. We can talk about the sheep. We can talk about the wise men and the stars and the shepherds and all that. But the birth of Jesus was something very, very different than what it appeared on the surface. He didn't come like a king, right? But was, and never had to exert that he was, because he was so sure of who he was and what his purpose was there. So, I love that Jesus's birth was like the beginning of the rescue mission for humanity. Like, he came for us, which, if you really think about it, is mind boggling. Why on earth? Well, I ask him all the time, what on earth do you want from me? Like, why me? So how does your understanding of that, Jesus coming to literally rescue humanity, how does that change your approach to just day-to-day relationship with him?
Well, we talked about relationship before we started the podcast. You said how we all grew up in church knowing the facts. And you just said knowledge will take you away from a trusting relationship with Jesus, right? And so the relationship part is so important, because he does say he's the Alpha and the Omega. He is the beginning and the end. He is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords, but he's also our friend and our counselor and our loving Father. And when we truly allow ourselves to be loved by him, then you will know that he knows you, and it will be easier to make him known, because you do become so close to him that you're automatically obedient. And
Yeah.
like Rachel and Sarah both said, obedience brings the blessing. We don't know why the Lord has called us to be authors, podcasters, helpers, servants in these
Right.
in these niches, but I'm honored to be called. And about 10 years ago, when the Lord was asking me to wake up earlier and to write more, I knew that I had my Moses moment where I was like, Lord, you've chosen the wrong man. But I knew that I did not want to be punished for being disobedient. So, and I didn't want to end up in the belly of a whale like Jonah.
Right.
And so I did. I said, okay, I'm going to do this. But I had a lot of conversations with God. I tried to make deals with God. I'm going to write
Mhm.
for you, Lord, but don't make me share it. Or if you do want me to share it, you have to open that door wide open. And things fell in place where I was able to share and publish a book. And y'all know my story about my podcast. It kind of found me. I didn't go looking for it. So these are all, I'm honored to be in relationship with Jesus. And all he wants really is our yes. And when we give him our yes and we meet him, early in the morning and we listen, we open our ears and we stop talking, which is really hard for us women.
Yeah.
Uh,
Super important.
he will give you the word. He will give you the path. My favorite Bible verse is trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your path. Proverbs 3:5 and 6. But that I sang that as a child, in Sunday school as a song, and it just repeats in my head. Lord, I don't know what you're doing, but I trust you. So will you please make my path straight? And sometimes it doesn't look so straight, like you say, when I try to take the reins. But when I completely surrender to him, he makes my path straight. He does. My oldest son is 22 years old, and I just drove for 6 days to Anchorage, Alaska from Mississippi with him.
Wow.
And yes,
Wow.
yes. So don't give up on your young children. Love them through the hard middle school and high school years, and they will come back. It will seem like an alien stole their brain, but they will come back. And so we listened to a lot of music and podcasts. We had some good conversations, but one of the podcasts we listened to was, you've probably heard of him, Cliff Connectel. He goes to the college campuses and he debates whether or not Christ is real or not.
Love Cliff.
But
Love
yeah,
him.
love
No,
Cliff.
wait, does he debate for or against?
For
A for, right? I only know that because Sarah said she loved him. So I'm like, okay, he's all right.
Oh,
yes,
he's amazing. Yeah, I literally watch him, his videos, shorts, YouTubes. I watch him every day because I learn so much from him. Yeah.
Say his
What?
name again,
Yeah.
Carrie.
Cliff Connectel starts with a K.
Cliff Connectel.
Yeah.
Okay. I've not ever heard of him. I got to look him up now.
Yes, and he debates Logan Paul on Logan Paul's podcast called Impulsive. The Paul is in the middle of impulsive. And I don't know that Logan
don't pray
Paul
for
ever
Logan
becomes
Paul.
a Christian. I hope that he does, but their debate is 3 hours long. It's worth listening to. And I would
Wow.
have never heard that had my 22-year-old son not introduced me to it. It's very good.
Logan Paul,
Really
he's the guy who
cool.
just fought Mike Tyson, right?
No, that's
No.
his
His
little
brother,
brother.
Jake.
Oh, that's his brother. Yeah, because he gave his life to the Lord right
He
before
did.
the
So they're
right
both
before the
on
fight.
this podcast. You'll
Yeah.
have to listen. Yeah.
If I was going to fight Mike Tyson, I would also give my life to Lord right then. I'm just telling you. Now, listen, I
True
watched
story.
the fight and I was real
That's a conversion
disappointed.
event
But
right there.
Yeah.
you don't know
Yeah,
how
true
it's going to go
story.
down.
Yeah.
Just in case you're going to see Jesus momentarily, you want to
Right.
have a relationship real quick.
Yeah, in
agree.
case you get that the final KO. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
But it
still
is
so
the
glad about
humility,
that
like
fight.
you were talking about, that chiastic structure. The weak
Yes.
will be strong, the strong will be weak, the humble will be, so
Yeah.
exalted, the exalted will be humbled. All that chiastic structure, like Esther being an orphan, she becomes a queen. Jesus is, born in a manger. He is the king. I love all that too. And it
I
is
tell
it's
you, it's
a great
Alice in
mystery of
Wonderland.
yeah.
Yes, I love that. You know what? I know this sounds so goofy, but I love that other people see that because I'm constantly like, babe, did you know this? My husband probably thinks I'm a wacko, but it's true. Like anytime you think it should be this way, you got to know 100% God's going the other way.
Yeah.
100%. He's taking you the other way. If you think it's so easy, he's like, hold tight, you
Mhm.
know? There's
Mhm.
it's always the opposite. Up is down, down is up. And I love my favorite thing about Jesus is that he uses the least of people. He uses the least of people. And I am madly in love with the least of people. I have had more Holy Spirit encounters. I'm talking about crazy experiences teaching in a prison than I've ever had in a church. I was teaching one night in a room full of women. My classes usually run between like 40 and 70 people. And you know how sometimes you're just not feeling it? You're just not feeling it, right? You just feel dry, you're not feeling it. And I go in and my class is really small. It's 15 women. And 3 of them tell me right off the bat that they don't want to be in this class. They don't believe in God. They're sick of watching The Price is Right. I'm like, okay, whatever. So we're in this room and I tell God on the way in, I'm like, Lord, I didn't prepare anything. I don't have anything. I feel totally dry. So I just need you to do your thing. I need you to just show up. Don't disappoint them because I didn't prepare. Right. And I go in, and so I have these 15 women, and I'm like, gosh, my class is really small. And I feel just this. I usually ask them like an icebreaker question. And it's usually something goofy, like if you were an amusement park ride, what would you be? Right? If your life was like a pint of ice cream, what flavor would you be? And I do that just to kind of start form a relationship. But that night I said, can we just name one thing that you're thankful for today? And I said to the ladies that did believe in God, I said, if you don't believe in God, that's fine. It's just gratitude, right? And so we go around the room and these women begin to talk about what they're grateful for. And man, I feel the Holy Spirit like hit that room. And I'm like, okay, what is this about? And I said, you know what? Normally I would just launch into teaching. How about I just play a couple worship songs and let's just chill out? I've had a really long day. I'll be honest, I'm not prepared. Can we just like be here in the presence? So I turn on this worship song. I never close my eyes when I pray in the prison because, you know, you're not supposed to. It's good policy. Trust me. Every time I've done it, I've had something go awry. But I put my head down and I have my eyes open, but I'm crying so much that I can't even see. And I'm just worshiping. And I feel the Holy Spirit. Like, though I don't even know what's going on in the room, it's crazy. But I feel the Holy Spirit tell me, look up. And I literally look up. Nobody's sitting at their desks. Women are all over the place. I have 2 women laid out on the floor speaking in tongues. I have a woman in the corner of the room raising her hands and like praising God. This is one of the ladies that doesn't believe in God. Raising her hands, praising God, but she's got her face in the corner so that I guess it's like a little kid when they close their eyes. You know, they think that you can't see them. But that's how they get privacy there. And I mean, it's like these women are just on their hands and knees praising God. And it's this whole thing. And I can't breathe. Like I cannot breathe. I'm crying so hard. I'm in just this moment of awe. And God said, it's not about your faithfulness. It's always about mine. And it just, I'm talking about smoke. Rips me
Wow.
out. And I couldn't call my husband on the way home because I just couldn't talk. I was so overwhelmed by the goodness of God. And that is something that if that ever happens, if you ever like really encounter the goodness, it's like a drug. It's like a drug. It's all you want. You just want to be in his presence all the time and you just can't seem to get away from it, you know? So, you know, Christmas is supposed to be this time of his presence. But yet obviously we make it lots of different things and that's okay. I don't think he holds that against us. You know, I think that fortunately he's really graceful, but we make it about so many different things. You know, do either of you guys, any of you guys have that problem where you're in that moment and you haven't bought this Christmas present and, you know, you got to go do this and you're going to your in-laws for 9 days, you know, I mean, it's like all the things. How do you, and we'll kind of wrap up with this, but how do you keep yourself in the presence during Christmas? Rachel, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So this Christmas has actually been a lot different for me than past Christmases in terms of execution. I'm a big Christmas gal. My birthday is November 5th. And so pretty much from around the time my birthday until December 25th, it is all Christmas all the time. And this year we have pared back so much. We don't even have a Christmas tree up right now. You can see a whole bunch of Christmas lights behind me. Pretty much what we've done is put up a ton of Christmas lights and just focus on doing things together.
That's
And that
awesome.
it has been so cleansing for me. God gave me a couple of words over the summer. The acronym is SOAR, and it is for creating space in your life through simplicity, order, authenticity, and rhythm. And so this Christmas so far, just paring it down and creating this space for togetherness instead of being stressed about getting all the decorations up and trying to do all the things. It's been so healing, and it's felt like Christmas for the first time in a very long time. And I think simplicity is so underrated, especially in today's society. We're very much a consumerist culture. We're constantly being fed information and things we need to buy and things we need to do and fed all these expectations. And so just kind of stripping it all away is so life-giving. And that's just, it's been transformative this Christmas.
Well, that's so good. And it just takes the pressure off of you, doesn't it? You just don't
Absolutely.
have to do all the things, because God always talks about us being, not doing, but what we love to do, don't we? We love to do. So I love that. And it's like your Christmas lights. I think that's very festive. And your
Oh, they're so
onesie.
fun. Yes. Yeah, it's the important things. And it's so cozy. It ties the place together. I'm like, I'm never going back. I'm going to throw out like 4 of my bins, I
Wow.
swear, that are just stuffed to the
Freedom.
gills with stuff. Yeah.
That's right. Be so free. That's funny. Carrie, what about you? How do you maintain the presence when I know you. I can look at you and tell you cook all the things, you do all the things, you like it all perfect, don't you?
I do. But like Rachel this year, because I took that 1 week trip with my oldest son, and I've just released this book in the last month.
Yeah.
I really took what I could do in a matter of minutes because I've gotten down to a really strict schedule during the day and said, okay, if I can't get it done in this amount of time, it's not going to get done. Like my
Yeah.
tree's not done. About half of what I usually pull out is pulled out. I put all the rest back in storage and I was like, that's going to be fine this year.
Seems like the theme is paring down. I like that. I love the idea. I mean, okay. I love the idea of a 6-day road trip with my child. Would I actually like it? I've been on 3-day road trips with him when it's just been us, and it's been amazing, honestly. But he was a lot younger. Of course, now I'd probably just wear his headphones all the time. But I love that you did that during the holiday season. How do you feel like that impacted you guys' relationship?
Well, it was huge. And one real quick story was we didn't have a lot of cellular service because we were going
Oh,
through, right? Yeah. So, because we were going through the mountains the last 4 days. So, we had gone north through over the Canadian border and we were driving through Banff National Park and
mhm.
Jasper National Park. No gas stations, no cell service. And we almost ran out of gas. And through a comedy of not errors, but we met a few people who were not very nice that we didn't plan our trip. And in Canadian language, they said, we were hooped. You're hooped. You're hooped, bud. And so we just thought that's not good Southern hospitality now, is it?
That's like, bless your heart. Just bless your heart.
Watch
Bless
out
your
for those
heart is pretty
Canadians,
much,
man.
and those were 2 park rangers. And then so another tour bus came by and he stopped and he said, you have to keep driving. And we said, well, we think we have an hour left till we get to the next village and we have about 30 gallons of gas. And that's not going to take us an hour. And
Oh, goodness.
so what I told my son is typically these newer cars can go 40 to 50 miles past E. So let's just keep driving. And that's what the older gentleman had told us. You can't sit here. You'll freeze to death. Keep going because it was very snowy. The road was ice and snow. It was a whiteout. I mean, on either side of us, the mountains were white, flocked trees, the whole bit. And so I said, ignorance is bliss. We didn't even think to look and see what the weather was going to be. But we got to the next village probably about 50 gallons past the E. So we prayed the whole time and we just
Nice.
praised Jesus for getting us there. And we just sat in that Shell station parking lot just praising Jesus.
Wow.
So I
my
think his
heart.
faith and my faith grew exponentially on this trip. So
Like the
That's
Grinch's
an
heart.
awesome story.
yeah, it was a great
Wow.
Christmas story to be told to my grandchildren
Yay.
one day.
That's
There you
right.
go.
Yes.
Also, to be clear, I'm married to a Canadian. I did not make a Canadians without there being that loving heart there. I love Canadians. So
Oh,
Meanwhile, he's in the
everybody else
back room.
was very nice. It was this park ranger were shocked that we had not planned our trip.
Her husband's in the back room, like, why would they possibly go 50 miles over? That's funny. I love that. I love that story. You know what? That is so cool with me. He like really like he shows up in the craziest moments. And I think once you start looking for it, I call it the Easter egg effect. I don't know why I coined that, but it's like he drops these little Easter eggs and he waits for you to find them. And then once you find a few of them and you realize what he's doing, then you start to look everywhere, right? And it becomes crazy. You begin to see God like in everything. Um, I wish I had figured out what I figured out in the last 3 years. I wish I had figured that out 20 years ago, you know? And I had asked God, why did you wait so long to show me this you? Like, why did you wait? And he told me the most interesting thing. He said, Carrie, if I would have given you what you prayed for when you prayed for it, you would have destroyed it.
You weren't
And it
ready.
was 100% dead on. I was not mature enough to handle it. So I'm going to tell you for the last 3 years and the next however long, like, I mean, he has to beat me off with a stick. I am so madly in love with the way that he shows up. And especially like for your son like that, because he has shown up for my son like that too. Right. Where, teenagers they can be sassy. They can be a lot. And, my son always says something like, well, if God answers your prayers, that kind of thing. And then God always smokes him. And I'm like, I told you I'm his favorite. I love that he does that.
Yeah.
Sarah, I'm going to let you finish us out. We're going to talk a little bit and then I want you ladies to go through and tell our audience what you do and how they can find you. But Sarah, I don't want you to answer that question. I want you to answer a different question.
Okay.
Yeah. You have such a fiery heart. You have such like the fire of the Lord on you that I love it. And I've noticed it from the very beginning, right? And so I just have a different question for you. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Fire away.
Okay. So you heard me say that one of the things that I love about God is he always shows up, right? Whether he shows up as the Holy Spirit, he shows up as Jesus, he shows up as God the Father, right?
Mm-hmm.
He always shows up for us, even in the moments where we push him away, even in the moments of our deepest sin. We recently left the church that we belong to because I heard the pastor say from the pulpit that when we sin, God has to walk away. And I'm like, hold out. That's not truth.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've actually said to the Lord, where were you in this moment? You say you love me. Where were you in this moment? Right. So we've had those deep conversations, which I'm thankful for because how can you truly love somebody if you don't truly know them? And you mentioned having those kind of conversations with God where it was like, what about me? What about me? Where's all this love, So God is constantly showing us the lengths that he will go to love us and to get our attention, right? Talk about a time in your life where the Lord has shown you the length that he will go to love you.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, and there are so many examples as I look back at the footprints of my life. There's that famous poem that I'm
Yeah.
sure your listeners and people on this panel, everyone knows that footprints poem. Even if you're not a Christian, your grandma had it in her, bathroom or
I was
whatever.
gonna say my grandma had it on her wall.
Yeah, right. And, if you don't know, if you're not familiar, it's a poem that says that, someone looks back at the sand. They're at this, on the beach, and they look back and, and they notice that the hardest times in their life, there was only one set of footprints in the sand. And they ask God, why did you abandon me during those hard times? And in the footprints poem, he says, no, those are the times when I carried you. And
Yeah.
well, that poem is only partially true. For the believer, for those who are chosen as children of God, and the word is clear that before you were formed in your mother's womb, I knew you. God says in the book of Jeremiah. And so uh, we know that God knows us and chooses us before the foundation of the world. There's always only one set of footprints in the sand. There's never two. Even when you are in your rebellion, God is there with you. Is he participating in it? No, and it breaks his heart. But he is there with you. He is always right there.
Mhm.
I was saved when I was 17 years old. Yes, saved. What do you mean your dad was a pastor? That's right. God has no grandchildren. Each one
That's right.
each one of us have to come to the Lord on our own. Just because my dad was a pastor and my mom was a pastor's wife and they were saved and I was raised in the church, I didn't believe. I walked away. I wanted to know, as I said before, I am a truther. And I didn't want to believe just because someone told me to. I
Yeah.
wanted to know what really was the truth. And the truth as was Jesus, and it was Jesus who found me. I was high in a bathroom in Lodi, California, living with my boyfriend at 17 years old. I had run away from home after having an abortion. When I say PKs, they go all out, they go all
They
out.
go all around. Yeah, they do.
But the Lord heard my parents' prayers. I had been chosen from the foundation of the earth. And in that bathroom in Lodi, California, I heard Sarah.
Woo!
He didn't say, "Sarah, this is God. Do you know?" No, all he said was my name. And I knew in that
Sarah, that
bathroom
gave
who
me
it
chill
was.
bumps.
I knew that
Wow.
that was the voice of my master. And from that moment on, my life was his. And
And
so that is what when you were saying earlier that, he changes everything. He comes into you and your life, your desires, your wants, your thoughts, your what drives you changes everything. And even in those incredibly hard, broken moments where I never once doubted that there was a God because I had already met him in that bathroom in Lodi, California. I knew that God was real. I didn't want to go see him. I was angry with him because he had allowed things that were incredibly hard into my life. But one moment that I can point to where God was so gracious was when I was 19 years old. I was sitting at a stoplight and I was rear-ended somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 miles an hour from behind. My
ow.
my neck was broken, my bicep was torn away, my pelvis was torn in two halves. I had to learn to walk again. I had to wear a brace around my pelvis. It was an incredible time that I went through, learning to walk again, learning to reuse my young body, which was now damaged, and there was an incredible miscarriage of justice. And my body was broken, and I was 21 years old, and I was laying in the bathtub weeping after being carried out of the courthouse because I couldn't walk. And in that bathtub, it was, God, how could you allow me to go through this? I'm so young. My career is gone. How could you allow me to go through this? And the Lord said, Sarah, I will take care of you. He spoke to me. For the rest of your life, I will take care of you. And from that moment on, I actually had a dream that night that in my dream I was running. I had to wear a brace around my pelvis to even be able to walk. And I woke up and I put my feet on the floor and I stood up without my brace and I went out the front door and I ran 2 miles. And the Lord, from that moment on, every time throughout my life that money has been tight or I haven't, oh gosh, am I going to pay this bill or this rent or whatever, in my younger days. The Lord always took care of that. And like that footprints poem in my life, even in those incredibly hard times, there has always only been one set of footprints in the sand. He has carried me from the womb, and he will carry me to the tomb, and he will carry me into eternity. And it's not just me. He is carrying you.
Mhm. Amen.
Love that story. My goodness. Lord, you almost made me cry twice. It's
It's
just
the Lord, God is good. Life is hard. God is good. Never
That's right.
confuse the two.
that's right. That's right. Never confuse the two. That's true. Sounds like what is that? It's so funny. At the end of what you just said, I wanted to put that, and people are crazy.
And people be
Yes.
crazy. It is so true. That is 100% true. People
It's
be
true.
crazy.
It's
Yeah.
true. Sarah, tell people where they can find your podcast, your website. If they want to connect with you, where can they find you on the World Wide Web?
On the World Wide Web, my podcast is called The Remedy with Sarah Amazing Grace. I'm often shadow banned because I do post a lot of truth content, and in the world that we live in now, that's not received very well. And so you
Sure.
have to type in Apple, Google, Spotify, you have to type in The Remedy with Sarah Amazing Grace, and it will come up. Or you can find me at my website, sarahamazinggrace.com. My book will be coming out next year, and you can read an excerpt there. It's called The Chosen Ones. And yeah. So and you can send me a message if you need prayer. If you have something going on in your life, some heavy burden, you can contact me through there, send a message. I would love to pray for you.
Love that. And that is Sarah with an H at the end, you guys. And we'll link all that in the show notes so that you can find her easily. Carrie, let everybody know where they can find you.
Sure. My website is carriewatts.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram is Carrie Watts Writes. Facebook is Carrie On or Carrie Watts. So I have a new book out called Crisis of Faith. It's a young adult Christian fiction about two best friends, and they run a safe house for girls running from abuse. And it's on Amazon, Walmart.com, all the places you can get a book. My publisher is Hope Book Publishers. So it's on hopebook.com/crisis of faith. And I have a podcast called Saved and Strong. You can find it on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen, whatever podcast channel you enjoy listening to.
I love that. I love that. So for those of you that are still looking for Christmas presents, now, Carrie, what age group would you recommend this book for? You said young adult.
Yes. So my ideal reader is probably 13 to 15 years old, but I
Okay.
have had women read it all the way up through 80 years old. And they said, "Oh, Carrie, we love your book." So any age is fine. My XYZ statement or my elevator pitch is that I write to the Christian young woman who desires to rediscover her childlike faith so she can heal and trust Jesus.
Oh, I love that. Are you writing a second book?
Yes. I hope that this will be a sequel, probably 3 to 5 books.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like. That's awesome. Rachel, I know that you do more than ADHD, but that speaks to my heart. That's my love language right there. Now, Rachel also does some marketing. So talk a little bit about that and give us where to find you on the World Wide Web.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got those two different projects that I am working on with the ADHD content. I am primarily active on TikTok and YouTube. So you can find my website at rachelgrit.com, or my YouTube is just Rachel Grit. And on TikTok, I am rachel.grit. And the content that I focus on, I also have the True Grit podcast. And the content there is specifically focused to help women who've got chaos in their lives and in their brains seek, find, and live the abundant life Jesus promises. And on the marketing front, the website is truegritmarketing.co, or you can shoot me an email, rachel@truegritmarketing.co. And I focus on helping small business owners organize, simplify, and amplify their marketing by figuring out the next best step in their marketing, which I do for free. And then over the course of one day, working to transform their marketing with that next best step. So rachelgrit.com and truegritmarketing.co.
Rachel, you know how I know that you deal with ADHD people? Because you're like, listen, I don't have a 6-week course. I'm going to give it to you in one day. Because that's your whole attention span right there.
Works. Yeah, it's so great because I get to be the idea person and come up with all these great ideas, but there's not that sustained long process. It really allows me to do my best work, which is so much fun.
People ask all the time, how do I know my ideal client? Beach? I'm like, it's you. That's it. It's just real easy. It's you. That's why God allows people to walk through these things, because it's you. You know, that's that.
For
Ladies,
sure.
thank you so much for sharing your hearts and your minds and your time with me. I mean, I just talked about how the Lord shows up in these really, like, I always call him Jehovah's sneaky ways. You know, he rolls up with 3 women that I could not have asked for better podcast guests, and all very different, and all very different lives and different aspects and facets of his personality. You guys are just amazing. So thank you so much for doing this on the fly. I loved it. It was great.
It's totally my jam. I love last minute, fun, spur of the moment things.
Yeah.
Because you're
Surprise, right?
Meanwhile, Carrie's like, oh Lord, I'm so good.
No,
Carrie,
I have enjoyed
because
every
we-
minute. I just didn't want to interrupt.
When we-
I thank you, Carrie. Thank you for inviting us.
You're so
Yeah,
welcome.
this is lovely. Thank
Sarah,
you so
you a
much.
last minute person, or do you like a plan?
Oh no, I'm a fly by the seat of my pants kind of girl.
I love it. See, the right people at the right
Absolutely.
time. Thank you guys for being part of the Kingdom Life Women podcast, and we will see you again next Wednesday. Merry Christmas. We'll see you guys soon.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.